Greetings and welcome. My name is Mike Bankhead. I am your host. I'm a bass player and songwriter from the Gem City, Dayton, Ohio. I welcome back to the podcast Josh Bradford, who is currently from Texas, but as you will see in our conversation, he is about to cut ties with Texas. So he has some different life circumstances. Find out about that on the You Could Be My Aramis podcast. You might recall that Josh is an accomplished pianist and he really likes to talk. So this one is a little long, but not too long, I promise. Let's get to the conversation. Hey Josh, welcome back.
Hello, Mike.
How you feeling today?
I'm kind of surprised I'm still in Texas. I thought I would be out of the state by now.
Texas is really big. It's kind of hard to get out of Texas.
Well, yeah, but I'm still in the DFW Metroplex. Like I'm still being a nomad within 100 miles of where I lived. So this is not what I was expecting to start off this period. Everything has been pushed back a week for me. I got COVID for 2 weeks in July, and unfortunately, what that meant is that everything got pushed back a week. So it's been good in some ways, but this is definitely the week of like limbo time for me. So I do officially, I get to officially leave on September 13th. So that's a few days from today. By the time this is airing, I'm either going to be in North Carolina or in New York, one of those two. Or if plans change, I could end up somewhere else. Who knows? So, yeah.
So I was going to make a joke that, well, you must not be putting much effort into leaving Texas because you should at least be near Texarkana, El Paso, or Lubbock by now. But
well, considering I can't stand any of those places, I would rather I'd rather be near an airport that I know is going to get me where I need to get to very quickly. So that's the reason for staying around near DFW and
that makes
Love
sense.
Field and stuff. So yeah.
Now, see, I kind of know what's going on in your current journey, but the people listening are completely lost right now. So, Josh, this is your opportunity to explain.
Yes. There
what
is.
exactly has been pushed back a week? Let's explain that to the listeners.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's the reason why we get to talk a little bit, and then the listeners get to like, what's he talking about? That's all planned. So I have moved out of my apartment, and I have basically decided that I am not ready to settle anywhere for a while. I'm really frustrated with the roles in which I feel like I'm supposed to stay within, and I've always wanted to do some world traveling, and basically, I feel like the universe is saying now's the time. There is no, there has been no marriage. The engagement I was in that fell apart before COVID. I've put in 28 years into proving that I can be a musician, proving that I can officially make money, earn an income, take care of things while pursuing that in some way, whether that's teaching or being a piano player or, working for a show or whatever. So now is this sort of like time to create a whole different means of, I guess you could say, living the rest of my life. And since I don't have any really big relationship or, money or business obligations, and honestly, we don't know what's going to happen in 20 years. So I'm like, I don't want to wait till I'm, quote, retired. So this is kind of my moment to do this. So I'm calling it, for right now, I guess you could say I'm calling it the creative nomadic journey.
We got to get your marketing department to come up with something more snazzy.
Okay, well, help me out. I mean, come on. I don't know what to call this thing. I mean, because I find it really interesting to talk about this because, there's three questions that everyone wants to know. They want to know, where are you moving to? And it's like, well, I'm not moving any place. I'm moving towards myself. Well, if they're not ready to have that conversation, the conversation like kind of stops there.
Maybe they just want to know where to send you mail.
Well, and again, the people that want to send me mail, I give them an address, but that's not what people are asking. They're not asking where they send me stuff. They're wanting to know where I'm going to move. Or the next thing is, well, what are you going to be doing? I'm going to be working towards a lifestyle where my productivity does not equal my worthiness. And so I'm doing a very sort of, I think it's very, very out of the norm. It may be a bit extreme for some people, but a lot of people are very envious of it at the same time. There's definitely not been like anybody in my life, including my family, that has been like, you shouldn't do this. Like there isn't any of that. But I can tell that people are like in two camps. It's like they're either really all in on it and they're just like going on the journey with me, or they're like wanting to know what the destination is. And it's like, you're going to have to be patient because that's the whole point, is to learn to savor the journey and learn how to, I don't know. It's just, I just need to stop being afraid of a bunch of stuff. And I needed to, I'm just at a point where there's, I recognize that I'm in my mid 40s. There's not going to be another moment like this for me. I don't think the path is going to be as wide for me to walk through in order to make this kind of shift. And so that's what I'm doing. I mean, I sort of feel like I'm kind of following in the line of other artists and musicians that I admire, but at the same time, I've kind of been even sort of become aware that maybe that's not the best way to look at this, that this is very much a personal journey. And it's not about creating a project or music or art or whatever. It's literally about creating new connections, creating new relationships, creating a more, I would say it's a more encompassing sort of experience for myself. I mean, I'm literally looking at how can I go ahead and reshift my life so I don't keep falling into the same circles that I've been falling into the last 20 years. So.
Does that mean that you're not planning to do any music making? You called it a creative nomadic journey. So if it's the first word is creative, you're going to make something, right?
Well, so what is getting created is, if you're following the journey, then whatever I write, whatever I'm recording, whether that be an environmental recording or me reading something or me telling you something or a piece of music, or I share something I wrote, on a page or on a blog, I share an experience that I've had. All of a sudden, I guess you could say that in a certain way, I'm choosing to go maybe a documentary sort of route in terms of like, I think the way that I'm going to be sharing is kind of like sharing slice of life, like in the moment, which is very much the way that I sort of want to live my life. So it's about finding that balance between how much do I share and how much is just for me. And that's going to be something I figure out as I'm going along. But no, I mean, music making is still going to be happening. I mean, there's already people that are already setting up like, a little local concert here, or I don't want to say a little local concert. It's just, the focus is not worrying about what the next gig is, how I'm going to get, income for the next few months. I think where I'm at is I'm just literally taking in. I'm just out there. I'm meeting people. I'm experiencing things as they happen. And And yeah, I'm doing a pretty. I know I'm doing something that I would not recommend to do a lot of people. I don't recommend people to, sell their car and sell all their furniture and put everything in storage and then just go. This is because I know people that live in different places around the world. This is because there are hosts already for me. This is because I do have some savings. This is because I do feel like when the moment is ready, I'll know. And that's where I go ahead and start being more animate about what I'm creating. But at this point, I don't know where I want to settle. I don't know what's coming up next, and I can't force it. So that's where I'm at.
Where's your piano?
My piano is in Hurst, Texas. I'm saying that because if you do see me playing on it, that will probably be where it is. And there is plans to go ahead and do some recording on that piano, specifically because I haven't gotten to really release any recordings that have used my own piano, and so I will be coming back and recording using that instrument in the house that it's in right now. And I am there are places that I will have my own keyboard, or it's been made very, very clear that anybody that wants me to perform, it's like you're either paying to ship my keyboard with me or you're going to find me a decent instrument to play on. So, but again, like I said, I don't want this to be focused just on the music. I think that this is a time for me to explore myself as a writer. If I want to learn about how to make chocolate, if I want to get to know about a particular place and, try out something, this is the time to do it.
I think that there are plenty of people that would be interested in following along with that kind of adventure. Because one, nobody, let's be honest, I don't think anybody deep down really wants their productivity to define who they are. And we all have interests, and if we see somebody out there learning something that we might also like to learn, right, then there are going to be people who are going to watch you and see what you're up to. I really do think you got to come up with a better name than Creative Nomadic Journey.
Yeah, but again,
people that know you will have no problem with it. But if you want to grow this and have any other people poke their noses in, got to get them a hook.
So Mike, but the thing is, I'm in the throes of it. So that's why you have other people that come and suggest things for you, because
that's true.
I'm in the throes. And if somebody's going to come up with a catchy name, that's why you have somebody that is branding, or you have somebody that's working on your website, or you have someone that's working on your social media and like helping you. But for right now, what is this? There is no destination right now.
Well, how about this? You should crowdsource that from your mailing list first. Those are people that you're already a presence in their world to some degree because they're on your mailing list.
Yeah.
And second, let's invite listeners of this podcast to chip in with ideas. So if you were listening to Josh, if you're listening to Josh and me talk and have this conversation, dear listener, and you think you might have a catchy name for the sort of thing he's doing, you can either reach out to me, and at the end of the podcast, we'll have, I'm going to save the how to find Josh for the end. But at the end, you could take note of where to find him and reach out to him with that suggestion. So let's do a quick little summary. It's open-ended. We don't really have a confirmed destination. It's about the path. It's about the journey. It's about things that you learn. We know that North Carolina or New York, the states, are possibilities for places you might go, but that is not the limit.
Well, again, I'm starting there.
But
right. I do know, here are the destinations that are definitely confirmed.
Right.
North Carolina and New York. Okay?
Yep.
Now, from there, I know I'm going to stay in the States, but I know that to start next year, I'm going to be in Puerto Rico, Mexico, Australia, England, and Ireland. But there could be several other places that get stopped along the way.
Well, yeah, it's a long way from Australia to anywhere. So you've got a lot of places in between.
And for me, and this is another thing, it's like one of the things that I love about this is I could literally avoid summer if I want to.
Yeah. I mean, why wouldn't you? Go do, that's what you should do.
I think there's something that after this horrendously awful summer, I'm just like, I'm ready to just like not experience any summer at all. Let's travel the world in a way where I don't have to experience the crazy summer.
That sounds like the plan right there. So you said Puerto Rico and Mexico. How's your Spanish? I mean, you grew up in Texas, right? So it should be functional.
Es okay. Es bueno. Comprendo más palabras y frases, but I don't speak as well. like in other words, I read it and I can write it, I can text it, but in the moment I want to get much better, and I do think that my hosts are going to sort of like throw me out there.
Yeah, Mexico will help with that.
I've literally, well, and the thing is like what I've even learned is that if I end up being the person, which has always been the case, what gets me to speak in another language is when they know some English and I know some of whatever their language is, which in this case is Spanish. If I know more Spanish, we're going to end up speaking more in Spanish. And that's what forces me to communicate. That's what forces me to go ahead and make all those mistakes and just stumble all over my words until something makes sense.
Well, I could pretend that I don't speak English and we can just start this conversation.
That would be awful. That would be absolutely awful.
You know, I do speak fluent Spanish.
I didn't know that. And maybe next time, maybe we'll have a moment in Spanish and completely lose all of your English listening, followers out there. That would be fabulous.
I do the occasional podcast episode in Spanish. I'll have to email you one and you can listen to it for practice while you're on the road.
Oh yeah. Because I'm sure that I will understand everything that's said in that podcast. But you're right. I mean, that is what you do, is that you pick up. It's not about learning. It's not about understanding every word. It's about understanding what they're talking about.
Yes.
And then you get down to more specific things.
Yeah. Understanding every word only comes with a lot of time.
Yeah. So that's something else. It's like, I again, like we're talking about things I want to get over. I don't want to feel any sense of a problem. I haven't felt it so far, but I really want to experience being the person that speaks English and is the person that isn't speaking the language that everybody knows in a space. It doesn't really bother me. It actually, I think it forces me out of a comfort zone that's good for me. And as long as it's a language that I feel like I can grasp, but you hear me, like I like to talk, so I'm going to figure out a way to communicate with my voice. You
were motivated.
That's the way I am. So, I will make up words until something sounds right and they go, yeah. So
I feel like you're going to get a really good workout with gesturing.
I do already. And people love it. People love the gesturing for sure. So
you sent me some music that you wrote. It says you released it 20 years ago.
So the set of music that we're talking about is my first release that I ever tried to release in any form. It was a set of pieces that I ended up putting underneath the title of Openness. One of the pieces is called Openness, but it was an attempt at really taking something that a psychologist had wanted music for a set of meditations. And this was me going back in the studio and getting to re-record and remix them the way that I wanted to go ahead and represent what I wanted to sort of represent that idea. Even though a lot of the pieces are very open-ended and there's not really like a clear structure to them, there was still this idea of, well, we can still do it the way that I want it to be documented for this particular point. And so, yeah, the music is neither happy nor sad. The music is really about bringing what you want to on top of it. I will tell you that I do think that the last two long tracks are probably the one that I think have the most, I guess, emotional journey. but again, I don't know if that was the purpose. I think for me, it was about thinking about what is openness. Um, why is this word so important to me? And yeah, it was, you know, I was a 24-year-old, like really trying to figure out, like, is this what I'm going to do? And at that point, I really sort of considered myself more of a, I saw myself being more of an instrumentalist. I saw myself being more of the composer that would do an occasional song every so often. But yeah, I mean, I definitely saw myself in this kind of new age, um, new classical music era, you know, very contemporary music. But yeah, I mean, even at 24, I think I understand more about the music now, 20 years later, than that 24-year-old understood, which is why it's going to be fun to go ahead and revisit those pieces. And I have been revisiting them quite a bit, which I don't think that's any coincidence, considering that, oh, yeah, speaking of openness, that's kind of what I'm doing right now. It's like a big old like can of worms that I'm just like opening myself up to. So
By revisit, do you mean just listening to it again, or do you mean actually relearning those pieces and starting to?
oh no, two of the pieces that are on openness. Well, okay, two of them I actually used in my only film project that actually grew out of the COVID isolation, and it came out of this love of performance art and love of avant-garde and experimental film, and you know, a lot of this music that I play that has sort of a meditative quality. Um, but meditation, and I don't know if I mentioned this the last time I was talking with you on here, but meditation for me is not just stasis. Meditation is about letting everything in and out, and it doesn't. You let it go through you, and you try to figure out what's going on inside. You try to go inward and be aware of your surroundings without letting it affect what you're going through during that period. But meditations are journeys in and of themselves. They tend to be journeys more toward, you know, more toward yourself. Um, but yeah, I don't know if I'm making any sense. I'm hoping that some of this gets stranded together. But I really believe that one of the reasons that I wanted to go ahead and use these pieces is because they were on the original program that I had done live a few times. And when I decided to go ahead and make it into a film, I knew that these two pieces had to be in it. And one of the pieces that's called Looking Glass actually ended up being featured. It was the first piece of music I had featured in a film of any kind. So it's kind of interesting that I wanted to be a film composer. That's been something I've always kind of wanted to kind of have the right director, the right project, and not just be someone that submits a piece, but actually like really get to write a score for a film. I've definitely gotten to do that with theater, but I've not gotten to do that with a film just yet. And so I guess I sort of went about it the other way. I was like, well, fine. If I'm not going to get to write music for a movie, then I'm just going to go ahead and make my own performance art film, and I'll be the person making all the music for it with my music and other people's music, and I'll make a movie out of that. Um, so, and the movie just happens to be called Meditations Yield to the Fire. And the yield to the fire might still be something I keep in the title. Between openness and meditations, I sort of see my next stage being very keyboard oriented. It makes sense for me to keep it, you know, keyboard oriented, since I'm kind of on my own. Who knows though? Like, who knows? Again, I've seen writing and reading and observing becoming a much bigger part. I think because I really have the time to do it, and it's been quite a joy to have that, to just sit and just quite literally do nothing, except you're not doing nothing. You're just getting to pay attention to the stuff that you don't get to pay attention to any other time, because you're not worried about an end product, and you're not worried about meeting a deadline, and you're not worried about like producing something. This is all about whatever is around me can become, it might become part of what I create, or it might just be something that I get to enjoy or learn something from for a while. I feel in many ways, I feel like I'm sort of structuring my own education now.
Well, that's cool. You spent so much time educating, young people, and
that's exactly it.
Educate yourself.
It's time for me to let the universe and let others, I think, teach me. I don't necessarily mean like, I'm not trying to I'm not going to get another degree. I'm not doing that. But I do think that anytime we interact with somebody, and there are places I'm specifically going because of certain people that I really am inspired by, or I've really just enjoyed getting to know. And I just want to kind of, I want to see what could become of that. And who knows? I mean, those relationships could turn into business relationships. They could turn into really good friends. I could find a new family member. I mean, who knows? I'm very, very open at this point.
A couple of these, specifically Eternity and Openness 1, and there was one more, are really synth heavy. So yeah. I'm curious as to when do you decide to go super synth heavy versus actually, the super synth heavy stuff kind of hides your actual skill set when you're laying synth pads and combining them into a soundscape, which sounds perfectly fine. But there's a lot of people that don't have your level of piano chops that can do that, right? So I was wondering, when do you decide what direction you're going to go with a piece with like this?
Well, one of the things that made it really, really simple for me was when I was sitting down with the, again, this was a psychologist that actually hired me to go ahead and write music for a set, or put together music for a set of meditations, and I was quite literally recommended to her because somebody at the college I was at knew what I was into, knew the kind of music that I was getting into, and felt that this minimalist sort of conceptual music that I was writing was going to fit this. And if it didn't fit, I could come up with something that would fit what she wanted to have this. It was her name's Dr. Linda Duncan, and she might not even be practicing anymore, because I mean, we're talking about like over 20 years ago when I was I guess in a way commissioned to do these works. And so it was very easy for me to go, what do you hear? Like, do you want piano or do you want synth? And she's like, I want anything that's going to fit what the meditation is. And so we sort of kind of laid out a map, and she got to decide what she wanted. And then I got to come back in the studio and I got to create, if you notice the seven set of pieces, I love the number 7. I was very obsessed with it at that point. And, the odd tracks are all synth. They're all very synth heavy. And then the even tracks are all piano, with the one song actually happening right in between. That's number 4. But I also kind of look at the CD as kind of like my obsession with the LP, in the sense of, I feel like the first third would be like side 1, and then the next 2 pieces would be side 2. And if there could just magically be a third side to one record, that would be the last track. So it's very, very, I deliberately organized it the way that it was. There is a sense of like trying to create unity and trying to kind of give a hint to the listener. You've heard a synth piece, you've heard a piano piece, you hear another synth piece, and it's like, oh, I'm going to get into a piano, and then boom, there's a voice. So I don't know. I just went with it. With that, I also was trying to match the time limits. Like, there were 5-minute meditations, there were 10-minute meditations, and there was a 20-minute or 25-minute meditation. And so I tried to go ahead and create musical scapes or emotional journeys or whatever was needed, determined by those time limits. And so that's the reason why the first 4 pieces are like around 5 minutes, and the next 2 pieces are like 10 or 11 minutes, and the last piece is like a 20-minute one. You know, it's designed by what the person doing the meditations was wanting me to do. So time was definitely of the essence. Let's say that. I did have to keep time limits in perspective when I was recording this stuff. So
I think it's kind of amusing that you had to keep time limits in perspective, and there's an almost 20-minute piece.
Yeah. And the 20-minute piece is a very complex rondo. If you know what that means, it means that if you listen well enough, you'll hear the first part come back. But because it's in a 20-minute scape, it's like you hear that same thing come back. I believe it's 5 or 6 times, because, you know, I believe it's like an A, B, A, C, A, D, A, C, A, B, A. I mean, if you understand what that means, it's just like the A keeps coming back, but it's also like a mirror in and of itself. It's again, I was very, very into it. The structure was a way for me to organize the music, even though it's not my intention whether or not you get the structure or not. As far as I'm concerned, I don't care if you fall asleep while you're listening to it. That's okay.
Josh, one of the other things you sent to me is a recording called Ground Zero is Clear Today, and it's a lot of piano music. And I'd like you to talk about that.
It's interesting that you say a lot of piano music. I kind of like to kind of push back and go, what do you mean by a lot of piano music?
Well, there's like not bass and distorted guitar in it.
Well, I mean, if you mean that if it's a solo piano piece, then I mean, personally, I think that something like Looking Glass is definitely like a lot of piano, like there's a lot of notes. Whereas I feel like Ground Zero is Clear Today is very much more like a pebbles dropping into water. Like there's a sound and there's a sound.
We totally don't converse the same way. So no, it is sparse. The arrangement is much more sparse than and calm.
But do you know what I'm saying?
Peaceful, yeah.
Yeah.
When I say a lot of piano music, I mean like the piano's all I hear there. That's
well, yeah, it's a solo piano work. Just like if you were doing a guitar piece and all you heard was guitar, that's a lot of guitar. I get it now. So, well, Ground Zero is Clear Today is precisely what you would think it is. I mean, I was, I was a young 20-something. I had just started my master's when, the Twin Towers fell. And I was already, I like a lot of other, artists and composers and especially young people that were, sort of grappling with what this was going to mean in terms of like affecting the rest of our lives. I mean, when you're in college, there tends to be kind of more of a freedom, I think, to explore at least sort of. I'm trying to think of the way to use, like the sociological or the psychological effects of something, because you're already in kind of an academic environment, so there's a lot more freedom to kind of like talk about concerns. That come out of that. And, for a lot of us, that was kind of like the moment that was like a big deal. We were not alive, in any of the big wars, and anything that we saw was like on TV that was happening like way far away. It wasn't something that was like, here. But yeah, Ground Zero is Clear Today is one of those beautiful, rare moments where, I just sat at the piano, and it represents something that I love to do. I've done on your show before, where I get a set of sounds or there's a sound that works, and I just build from that. And that's exactly what Ground Zero was clear today. I literally went to the piano, and the first notes that I played are the first notes of the piece. And everything's just built from that. But this was during a period where I was allowing the concept of tragedy and the concept of how we tend to mark big moments in our lives with crazy tragedy or crazy trauma or something that is joyful to the point that it breaks a cycle. Like I do think that we tend to, I do think that we will block certain tragic or certain things that happen in our life because of trauma, but I think we do the same thing with joy in the same way, because I think we will always tend to kind of see the negative before we see the positive. And I was grappling, believe it or not, I was getting very psychological and very metaphysical at this point, as you do when you're in college. I think that's not an uncommon thing to do, is to kind of, to want to start exploring, trying to understand how you think, trying to understand how others think. And the thing that made me different, though, than every other composer at the college I was at that point, was I often got referred to as I'm a composing performer rather than a performing composer, which means that the ultimate goal is performance and the ultimate goal is communication. Not everyone composes music to communicate. That's crazy for me to think about, and it's something I take for granted, but I have to recognize that not everyone that makes music, that makes organized sound, is concerned about what they're communicating to a room of people. That's not why they do what they do. And I think that Ground Zero was clear today was my very, very clear effort to make it very, I guess, it was my way to make it very clear that I still want people to go somewhere with me. And so by linking us by a memory and then writing a program note that's saying, let there be no meditations, let there be no prayers, let's just be silent and mourn the way we need to mourn and laugh the way we need. I mean, I don't remember what the program note is, but I just remember that I was like, absolutely do not want any kind of Americanness going on with this. When I was watching the last beam getting lifted, it was silent. And I think that I wanted whatever I made music with, that there was going to be a lot of silence in that the breaks between the notes were just as important as the sounds themselves. So, and it's one of those pieces that was written within an hour. Like I played it, and then it was like all like written out within an hour. I think I took another few hours to make it appropriate for a composition assignment, and then I think I performed it the next week.
What year was this? What year?
2002. 2002.
Oh, so it's pretty fresh.
Like we're talking about, like, yeah. I mean, this was literally like the year and 1 month. It was in October. I don't remember if it was October 13th or whatever, but whenever the last beam was lifted, that made like national, news coverage. And I saw it happen. And right as it was going on, my keyboard, I didn't realize was on. I touched it, and that's the sound that came out. It's one of those wonderful, rare moments where I actually decided to take something that was spontaneous and turn it into a composition. So
when you listen to it now, does it take you back there? Like, can you remember what you were? I mean, it seems like you remember pretty well what you were feeling when that was tumbling out.
I do remember what I was feeling, but I also recognize that it means a lot of different things now. That it's another one of those pieces that marks time. It is very, very, like, for me, it definitely represents, this is me at this point. But it's also, to me, if you take the title away, I feel like it's a pretty universal. And even with that title, like Ground Zero is Clear Today, it sounds like a newspaper clipping. Like there is something that that the title is influencing what we're hearing, even if you don't understand what that necessarily means. I think it is, at one time, it's very of its time and also timeless because of what it is. I don't think I've been able to capture that very often. I don't think any of us get to do that. But I also, but like I said, I also don't play that piece very often. It really, really has to fit. It tends to fit in sets where I am concentrating on the idea of memorial, or concentrating on the idea of stillness or tragedy or whatever. It's got to fit. It's not one of those pieces that you're just going to just start playing. You definitely want it to have space, and you definitely want it to have the right environment to be experienced.
By the time this conversation we're having gets put up on the podcast and the listeners are hearing it, someone who was born on September 11th, 2001 will be old enough to legally purchase and consume alcohol in the United States.
Well, literally, we're talking about in 2 days. Yeah, exactly.
Well, but the podcast won't be up before then. So
yeah, exactly.
Time it's up, they'll be old enough.
Yeah.
There are a lot of people who were not alive for this event.
Mm-hmm.
And if you weren't alive for that event, maybe it's hard for them to understand the kind of milestone that was in the life of someone who is our age.
Well, what the younger generation does understand, and this is what I'm going to tell you from getting to work with students and getting to work with people who are, I'm sorry, whether they're children or teenagers or whatever, they're still people. They have minds. They react to things. And one of the things I will tell you is, depending on where on the political spectrum their families tend to be, is going to affect the way that they tend to view that event. But one of the things that is, I think that I'm seeing this sort of Generation Z coming up. They recognize that as a moment that a lot of freedoms seem to be gone, and this idea of constant surveillance. This is something that it's a surprisingly. This is something that young people discuss very intelligently when you let them discuss it. And because even if they weren't alive or they were just born, it had still affected the world they lived in and were children in, to a point that they knew that stuff had changed because of the way that their family makeup. And let's face it, technology was going at a rapid fire pace very soon after that. It felt like every year there was like some new toy or some new gadget, that we're getting. And then all of a sudden it was like the smartphone happened, and it's been crazy. It's been crazier since then,
I find that fascinating, and I'll tell you why. I'm a history nerd.
I love history as well.
So that means that I'm better versed than your average person on the street about things that have happened, say, 10, 30, 50, 60 years before I was born. And I can't think of any. I'm going to think of, right, a generation of people where I actually know people from this generation. So let's say my grandparents' generation. There are certainly many monumental events that happened during their lifetime that were as world-shattering at the time as what happened on September 11th, 2001 was to our generation.
Yeah.
And I can't think that anyone who wasn't a history nerd had ever considered or thought about any of those things unless they were forced to by a high school class. Right? Like I think about my grandparents who were children during the Great Depression,
Yes.
were alive and in their like prime of their youth when World War II started, and before the United States was involved, when the United States was a neutral nation.
Mm-hmm.
They were around for the attack on Pearl Harbor. My grandfather fought in Northern Africa and in Italy when the Allies made their invasion of Northern Africa and then invaded Europe.
Mm-hmm.
My grandfather, if you know anything about the United States, you know that he was treated much better over there.
Yes.
And in the army than he ever was when he came home because of the color.
And that's the reason why several of them did not come back. Yep. Yeah, I know.
But my grandparents and, of course, my parents were both alive for the John F. Kennedy assassination, which was televised, strangely,
Yeah.
Perhaps at the time the most shocking live televised event.
I would say that probably at that point, oh, yeah, for sure.
Like, it's really hard to, because technology has come so far and our generation is so separated from that. It's really hard, I think, for some people to put themselves in what that must have been like to the people of that generation.
Well, again, and it's the aspect that even in 2001, we were not in as much of our own echo chambers yet, because we didn't have social media on the level that we have it, that we were going to have it in a few years.
Yeah.
And so I think that I think that for those of us that are like our age and even children that witnessed it, I think that was sort of like one of those final collective moments that we had because we were seeing it at the same time on television. Not necessarily because I'm not saying that there aren't things that don't affect millions of people now. I mean, we're watching stuff happening live all over the world
all the time,
but it's all the time now, and I feel like to a certain degree there is I don't want to speak like I'm an expert in all, but I do tend to think that there are several people that look at 9/11 as, and specifically the actual Twin Towers falling. That is the beginning of what the 21st century was going to hold for us. I mean, I for many people, you're talking about mental health, and you talk about like all the stuff that all these. We're a much more anxious. We're a much more untrusting. We're, just overall, I just feel like I feel like we're being forced to live in a way that is not conducive to being human. And that is, that's been something that we've been exploring since the industrial age. And I feel like the information age has just really like put microscopes on this for all of us. And I have to say that I think that that's why I'm choosing to do what I'm doing now. I think it starts from like a moment like 9/11, and I don't want that to be the thing that shocks me out of reality. Or it shocks me out of my own bubble, that shocks me out of my own circle, that shocks me into an experience that's much, much universal. I think that I'm wanting to see the world before I'm going to just trust science here. I mean, I'm just trusting scientific, thing, what, how do I say this?
You want to see the world before before a lot of it's not here anymore?
Well, I want to see the world before the MIT predictions of when world civilization will collapse. Yeah. And I think that many of us in this like early millennial stage think that, I think there's a lot of people that are really thinking it's really far off. And it's like, no, it's within a generation. Like, I mean, if we're going by scientific time models, and unfortunately, the pandemic we've been through has just proven and shown to some degree that we've just, it looked like things were going to get better, and then we've completely flipped it on its head. And no, sociologically, we can still take ourselves out, and we will. We seem determined that there is a small population of the human race that does not seem to care about the rest of our species or the world as it is, as long as they get what they want. And I don't want to end it. I'm not trying to end this I'm not trying to end this time on something grim, but I do think that we have to be cognizant of where we could be heading and where we likely are. And I guess maybe the reason I kind of want to see the world and maybe I think I do kind of feel like am I getting ready for the Hunger Games? Like, am I going to be like an old person when that's going on? Like those kind of like scenarios of like survival and whatnot. I really, really, really now I feel like I truly understand why young people have been drawn so much to dystopian and horror stories. So
on a non-grim note, if we wanted to follow your adventures on your creative nomadic journey, how would we do that?
The best thing I'm telling people to do right now is to follow me on Instagram. Find me, Josh Bradford Music, on Instagram. And I'm going to tell you that my website is going through a major rehash. There will be a relaunching happening soon, and it might happen before this is aired. But yeah, I would say reach me at my Instagram, or hopefully joshbradfordmusic.com will be fully functional, and you can go ahead and find my website. You can and you'll be able to sign up for my emails. But yeah, I'm attempting to make my website into a one-stop shop where you don't have to go to 3 or 4 different places, but you can just go there, and everything that you've been seeing on social media and everything that you see in emails, you actually can get more detail on the website. Kind of trying to turn that into kind of more of an explorative, scrapbooky kind of place. So we're trying to still figure out how to do that with my web designer and I. So, but it'll get there. So
excellent. I will link to your Instagram page in the show notes. I will also link to all of the pieces of music that we talked about, so that
it'd be great.
Go listen to those. Thank you for taking the time to talk to me before you leave Texas.
Yeah, no, I'm glad we did this, because this is perfect.
At some point, when you get somewhere that I haven't been, I'm going to want to do this again and talk about like what's outside your window right now, because if I haven't been there, I'm going to want to know. See.
Okay. Well, I guess you're going to have to follow my journeys, which luckily Mike is on my my email list. So
I am.
He's going to get first person. He's going to be one of the first people to know what's going on. So yeah, good for Mike. So
I am. Thanks, Josh.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate you a lot.
Hey, once again, thanks, Josh, for taking the time to talk to me. And again, folks, you can figure out where he's going and what he's doing there by jumping on his Instagram. There will be a link in the show notes. Thank you, dear listener, for being here. Hey, could you do me a favor? I would really love it if you would join my mailing list so I can keep you up to date on everything going on in my musical world. To do that, well, you just head on over to... No, it is not youcouldbemyaramis.com. You could head over to my website, mikebankheadmusic.com, scroll down, and there is a mailing list sign-up form. I really appreciate it. Thanks. Have a lovely weekend.